All right, we're back. We're going to talk about continuing building out this broadcast mix like template. Kind of where we left off was we've got everything built, we've got everything routed, we're getting everything to the mix bus and out to where it needs to go. We've got our DCA set up here. And the next thing we're going to talk about is gain staging. I talked about putting these trim plugins at the top of every channel. We do that because the front of house engineer is controlling our gain on the preamps there. So typically they're going to send us some good gain, but we just want to have control to like set it up for us. Now there's a lot of different information on gain staging and everything else like that. This is going to be a little different. I like in this scenario to keep my faders, since I'm going to be writing faders a lot, I like to keep my faders at 0, meaning all of these right here, because on my, as far as my faders go, I have better resolution when I'm moving around when my fader's up at 0. So like minus 5 dB, I have this much room. Whereas down here towards the bottom of my faders, you know, I've got 40 to 60, and that's about the same amount of space, and that's 20 dB difference. So the resolution is just easier for me to make smaller and finesse moves if I keep my faders here. So I kind of build my mix with my input gain here. A bunch of different ways you can do that. Sometimes I use like console emulations, so you can do that with your trim on like an SSL plugin or something, but we're just going to keep it simple with this trim plugin in Pro Tools. It's stock, it's free, comes with it. It also has a phase control, and we're going to talk about that as well, because to me that's about part of our gain staging, is getting our gain right. So our phase right, rather. We're going to start here, and typically I like having a VU meter at the top of my mix bus to see how my level's getting in there. I don't want to be clipping any of my channels, and I want to make sure that I kind of have a target that I'm shooting for. And I do that because, at least in our situation, our mixing room, we're mixing in headphones, and there's a lot of bleed from the sanctuary like coming in. So it's kind of hard to like really hear our low end and know where everything's sitting. So if I have a target, I know, and I kind of built my mix in my studio here, I kind of know where I need things to be sitting. So to start, I kind of like my kick drums, you know, hitting this around 3 before any compression or anything's going on. Now I'm going to be juicing that up as we go. So the other thing, I kind of want more headroom when I'm starting this. So I'm going to bring this, it's defaults at 18. I'm going to bring it up to 20 just so it gives me a little more headroom for where I'm going when I'm soloing things out. Now, normally I'd just be setting this with the band going, but I'm just trying to create a repeatable process here. So we're going to start here. I'm just going to solo up the drums. Again, I don't like mixing in solo. I'm just trying to demonstrate how we would get this together. So here's my drums, and I'm just going to start going. So I need this to stay up, and how you can do that in Pro Tools is just click this red button, so when I open other plugins, it'll stay. And yeah. All right, so let's talk about phase. I already have flipped. Spoiler alert. So phase is like really hard, and it's a long subject, and it took me forever to hear. And sometimes, especially when you don't have a great listening environment, it's really hard to hear the difference between in phase or out of phase. And sometimes things are just like really close, not quite 180 degrees out of phase. So a lot of times you're just making decisions based on your ear on what sounds better, and you should always do that. Don't try to overthink it. I'm going to try to illustrate the difference here. Typically, when I'm listening for phase, I'm listening for the body of the sound. I want more low end. It'll seem louder. The impact will seem better. And we'll go into this in later videos, much more detailed, like when we're editing drums and everything else like that. But really, I'm just listening for low end and impact. And so I'm just going to flip the phase and listen to the kick drum and see which one feels better. So if you're in headphones, that's a pretty massive difference. There's a ton more low end with this phase flip. So we're just going to go with it. I don't want to look at waveforms. I don't want to get crazy like that. I want to use my ears and just trust my ears. Now, I can illustrate the difference here is if you notice my kick drum when it's out of phase is kind of averaging around here. And when it's in phase, I'm getting more juice out of it. So check that out. Here's out of phase. Not even really getting to 5. Now here's in phase. So I'm definitely better off with this flipped here. So let's just keep going. And everything I'm doing now is going to be building off of balances off my kick drum. My kick drum's my target here. Everything else I'm just doing by making sure I'm not going to clip and building my balances from there. Another great example of that phase flip. Now on the snare top and snare bottom mic, these mics are on opposite sides of the drum, obviously, but when you're hitting down on the snare drum, the drum is moving away from the microphone. And then the drum is moving towards this microphone. So you can make an assumption that it's probably going to be out of phase, but it's another great opportunity for us to listen to the difference here. It just seems like the snare comes forward, has more low end. We're going to keep that phase flipped. We're going to be repeating this to get these toms here. Again, listening to that snare, listening to the imaging, I'm bringing this up until I feel like I'm getting a little bit of width out of my overheads here. We're just going to keep moving on down the line here, just bringing instruments in and getting our gain staging going. Start to understand like where you're going to need compression when you feel like you're moving this down and then up and then down and then up. Different notes are kind of in different places, so those are like what influence me to make decisions on like compressing or limiting or dynamic EQ or something. Could be notes, could be a frequency thing, but those are things I'm noticing, right? It's like, oh man, I can't really find a place for this to live. That's a note. I'm going to keep that in mind. I'm going to err on the side of giving myself more headroom because I know I can make that up later. leave vocals out of this equation right now because that's just, I think that'll just be a whole different day. But now I got my balances built. Now the next thing we got to start talking about is panning, right? I need to start making some space and creating my image here. So one thing I like to do is I like to pan my overheads in a little bit. I just don't, I want to make space for the wide stuff, and I don't think drums, you know, I don't need them crazy wide. So I'm going to tuck those in a little bit, and just making space for other stuff to live over there in the corners of my stereo image there. So, you know, I'm sure. Now, I like drummer perspective. I'm a drummer perspective boy. But when we're talking about pairing this with video, I need it to be visually accurate for the drummer. So I've already mic'd my overheads that way, but for as far as my panning goes for toms, I just need it to like mimic the video more than my perspective. That's cool. Might bring in my piano because then my synths can live further, wider out. That's cool. Now, if you notice, now let's set this. I'm going to set my headroom back to default 18. Let's see where we're at here. Yeah, so I mean, I'm hitting right here, but let's talk about the next cue on like EQ, right? I know I'm getting a lot of like mud and stuff from this and low end from my room mics, and I know I'm going to need to clean those up. Here, it's another hint, right? So I know we can just start with low cut, and I'm just going to bring this up, and you'll see as my gain changes. Like, watch when I cut all of this low end out. Look how much this changes. Especially low end, it is a lot of amplitude, so it can overload your mix bus quick. So this is also good visual cues for like, I have too much low end going on or something, like my drums aren't hitting and this thing is clipping, so what's happening, you know? And I always want to build my gain staging off my drums because I want my drums to hit, and I can't keep turning my drums up or I'm going to be overloading my mix bus. I want my drums to hit, and I'm going to bring everything into that. Now I'm going to use tricks and compression and all those things to like really bring that impact and really get me this drum sound I want. But when I'm building my gain staging, I'm cooking in headroom for myself, and I'm making sure that my drums, my impact is there, and I'm not going to be losing that. If I'm losing it, I got to turn stuff down. Now, this low end, when I'm cutting it out, I'm not going to do that aggressive a cut, but I'm going to find where I want this to live. And I'm not doing it based on this, really. I'm doing it by using my ears. I just trying to get rid of the mud and make sure I get that clarity back. I don't want it to be taken away from the actual punch of the kick, but I just want like the ambiance from these room mics. And I like my room mics pretty hot in a live mix because I want people to know it's live. I don't want it to feel like it's so isolated. Yeah, and as far as this EQ moves, I don't want to move this up. I felt like I was losing some of the snare. This is like a interesting frequency in the kick that's building up, is what I was hearing there. I could probably narrow that down. This, I'm kind of looking for like a lot of where the vocal's living, a lot of where that presence is. So I want to push it back a little bit because I want my vocal to occupy that space. So that's why I'm kind of making those kind of decisions there. All of these things, now I've got to start limiting my dynamic range. You know, going from my verse to my chorus can be like crazy like this. We don't want people constantly having to turn up their volume, turn it down, turn it up, turn it down. So we start the basics of compression is to start limiting my dynamic range. Now, compression is a rabbit hole, and we can talk about it forever. And there's so many different ways to utilize it. There's so many different philosophies on it out there. But basically, how I want to view it right now is I want to start limiting my dynamic range. And we'll start talking about that in future videos. But right now, I'm just going to kind of clean up some more of my low end. So I know my kick drum's a big deal on this low end, so I'll bring something up here. Something I also want to talk about, there's a lot of talk about low cuts or high pass filters, and they're like, oh my gosh, you're like cutting all this stuff out. Just because I'm like cutting at 30 doesn't mean nothing exists below 30. I'm just starting to shape my low end. I'm starting to control my low end. I'm starting to just massage it away and to be what I want it to be. This cut doesn't mean nothing exists down here. This slope is just slowly rolling off my low end, and I can make the slope however, this will even get more aggressive, but I guarantee you if we pull up a frequency analyzer, there's still stuff happening down here. This doesn't get rid of all of it. I'm just starting to shape it and smooth it away. Well, spoilers, I had this left over from my Sprint mix, but yeah, I'm going to be cutting that and, maybe even make it a little more. And this is why I don't do things in solo, because now I feel like my overheads are way too hot. So I'll start bringing it down. But that's what this is all about. It's just about kind of massaging things and moving things around until they're sitting where you want them to sit. LOL. That was my toms all along. These are my overheads. Wow, how embarrassing. All right, well, here we go. Here's another trigger. I am constantly pulling this up and down, and because I don't like my hi-hat, I'm getting a lot of hi-hat, and it's probably coming in my bleed from my snare mic. A lot of my tom mics. So that's another cue. What will help me fix that is starting to gate. So these are like, as I'm going, I'm taking notes in my head on here's something that gain and panning isn't helping me with. So I need to reach for other tools, EQ, gates, compressors, all sorts of different things to try to help bridge this gap to get it to be where I want it to be. So that's like how and why I start reaching for those tools. And then there's a million different ways to use them. And what tools do you use? And we'll talk about all that. But yeah, I hope this helps get your broadcast to the next level. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm glad to clarify anything you need. great song. It's an original by Zeal Church called So Good. Yeah, we'll see you next time.